sustainability became very important. You know, in Europe, it's far more important than it's been here. One, because energy costs were much higher. And two, they've taken it more seriously sooner. But these are the things that were done. I'm just curious, if you were to arrange them in an order, how you would do it. Insulating exterior glass, which is great. Double wall exterior, which is a gray water system, public transport, groundwater, bicycle storage, mobility, and kindergarten, dentist, fitness, everybody's there. You don't have to drive around to get to these things. Who would make what one first? Or are you happy with this list, everybody? Everybody happy with that? Or would you some other thing be number one? Think about it from an energy point of view. Big, global kind of issue. Public transport. What might follow that?
The mobility of restricted facilities.
Let's see what we, that's a question. Well, bicycle, these two deal with transportation, right? And then mobility, as you said. And then the rest, all important. These, while important, are less important, as you'll see in a moment. But these are big stories. Being able to reach this building by public transport or bike. When they added, I feel they've added several million square feet and didn't add one car park, but they did all with bikes and public transport. Major, major issue. There's the bike storage. You come down below, and these are ramps up. You park the bikes down here. You can take a shower after you bike, get dressed, go up to your office, and come back down and get your bike and go home. All stored there for free, at a very nominal charge. And let's talk about the double wall, the E-tower. All the new buildings began to get these double wall systems. You can see the interior wall and the exterior wall being added. This was the interior, exterior. Now in Europe, the double wall has been used a great deal. So it's like two walls with a space between. And that space gets insulated, and it does work. You can cool it, you can take the heat out of these spaces, you know, it gathers heat. You can exhaust the vacuum, the space between the glass. Very effective. And there you see some other sections of it. You can actually see this guy standing in the double wall at the moment. And so, but would you have a double wall on all four sides? Because most buildings, when they did it, do. What would you do? You would not do it?
No.
Where would you put the double walls?
Well, on the sides where it makes more sense to have.
Right. Normally in this hemisphere would be what?
Southwest.
Southwest, right.
Yeah.
Northeast doesn't need it as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so when you see buildings, I mean, Piano's a great architect, I have great respect, but the New York Times building has the same sun control device on all four sides, which is a screen. The screen works effectively on the south, because it blocks the light this way. But it doesn't work with direct light from the east or west, and the north doesn't need it. Now, architecturally, it looks great to have it on all four. But the problem is you're spending a lot of money to build it. From an energy point of view, it's a complete waste. So I think when you're talking about sustainability and energy devices, if it costs more to produce it than you're going to save on the building in terms of energy, then it doesn't make good sense. So these buildings now start to have the double wall on the south and the west, and the single walls on the north. We just did a building in, I just want to show you this, in Toronto for the Royal Bank of Canada, which is the highest, it has all the devices now for good energy saving. One, the air is distributed from the floor up. So if you're sitting here, we only have to cool you here. We don't have to cool up there. So you cool here, as the body heats the air, it does go out and exhaust it. So that works effectively. We have not only sun shades here, but we have light shelves on the inside to drive that light back further. So there are all kinds of, and then we just have a simple concrete slab from the ceiling we light off of. So here's one of those offices with the light shelves, and it makes a very glorious kind of space, and yet it's doing its job. So this was one of the new buildings in Holland, double wall. And the final, you can see this is all new. These are the new buildings, new building, and new. These are the reskinned. This is the new roof. Here's the train station. That train takes you to Amsterdam Center and the airport, Schiphol. Pretty darn good. And with your bikes, you can get around and enjoy the countryside. So anyway, this kind of really worked quite well. And he became a hero. And after this project, he became a major developer in Holland. So he took a big risk. And I think to succeed in life, Al's taken great risk, we all have to. He took the risk because he believed it was the right approach, even though this roof could have killed him. The cost of this was way over budget. We had to re-engineer it, redesign it in order to make it come in reasonably on budget. One of the biggest problems was all the expansion against the existing buildings, how you deal with that. And so we had to redesign the structure, but all worked out, and today it's a spectacular, fully leased, totally successful project. So in summary on this, I think architecturally you would say that, I hope you would, that the new buildings are quite handsome. The renovated ones are quite good because we're working with what we had. And two, we create a great sense of place. It's very environmentally friendly, deals effectively with transportation, and works as a great center for people to mix and shop and do every kind of thing, and using the bike effectively. So, all in all, very successful. Now, I have one other piece of the show which I think is just more entertainment, but I just want to know if anybody, on either case, Wacker Drive, which was the summary about the selection of a site, the courage to build in the face of a terrible market, or the belief in the building and belief in the site, and the fact that one of the first breakaways from a square or rectangle was that building, and we knew it could work. A courage on the part of the developer at the end of a terrible recession. And what I said. The next one, IBM, was about a leader who took over. What I didn't tell you, I wanted to summarize, in businesses and in government, you can see it. There are three kinds of leaders. The leader who starts the company has great skill to motivate, to have ideas, vision, excite you, get great followers, and the company does that, right? But he's not the best, or she's not the best to be a maintainer. Because to maintain the company was like, it's a different kind of leader. It's not somebody who's a wow, you know, excites everybody. And then if it starts to go downhill, the person who has to turn it around, there's got to be a totally different personality. Because that person has to have the courage to fire, to cut money, to do all kinds of, do surgery. Now, there's somebody who starts a company as a cheerleader who's trying to make it do well. The last thing they want to do is fire and cut, right? Having started a company, I can tell you that you want to be the cheerleader, making it exciting and great. You don't want to have to start firing everybody and cutting salaries and doing all kinds of things in order to save the company. That's what Lou Gerstner had to do. So he was perfect. His personality, his approach was perfect to that role. It's like Winston Churchill was perfect for 4 years, and he saved the world as a great leader for the 4 years of the war. He wasn't involved before or after, they wasn't even elected. But he was just right for that moment. So just when I teach leadership also, Harvard. So when you talk about leaders, there's no single leader who's going to be good all the time, in every condition. There can't be. And so different leaders are needed at different times in history. And Gerstner for IBM was key. Any questions?
Yes, and the best code in this project is just the people drive here and the rest of the best code inside.
I'm sorry, say that again. In this project?
Yeah.
Well, there are many entrances. I mean, each of these buildings have their own, but the main entrance to this complex is in this building here. Okay? Or along the sides. I mean, this is too big to have just one entrance. So you're entering retail, like a retail mall or things, you're going to enter in various places. But the major entrance here, along the side here, in each one of these buildings you can enter.
So, I mean, the people drive to here or?
Well, there's parking below grade,
Okay.
which you can't.
So then they take the bicycle around this side.
Well, they might, or they just drive and they go up to they walk to I mean, it's not that intimidating a walk to, if you park, you can park under here, you park under here. Getting to these buildings is not too bad. Or you come by bike. Or you may do both. They may have a bike there that you use to get around the neighborhood after you drive here. I think that's certainly a possibility.
Where's the main crossing from the train across that road? Is it up further?
Yeah, there's up further, and to be honest, I think they have an underground tunnel as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's easier to come up into this project. Any others? Any of the three cases, before I do the last piece? which is more entertainment than it's,
How many people work in this complex?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount, but several thousand obviously.
That's what
I'd just like to add that probably the most sustainable thing that I see is the fact that you reuse those buildings and you kept it from the.
Thank you, that's a very good point. And when I show things like Unilever, where we saved a building and redid it, that's the greatest sustainability, is saving buildings and reusing them. It's definitely, yeah.
I find it interesting when you talked about the sustainability issues and what would be the priorities. The top three were actually in the interest of the consumer, as opposed to necessarily being in the interest of the developer.
But the developer benefits when the consumer
Of course.
is supportive of it, possibly. I mean, when you think about it, when you rent a building leasing, you want that consumer to feel the good that whatever energy movements are going to help that person reduce their electric cost or whatever. So yeah, you always want appeal to the consumer so the developer benefits, right?
Yeah.
But good question, good point. Yeah.
You said that we're heading towards more simple design,
Yeah.
and in the case of 712 Fifth Avenue,
Yeah.
you used a historic building and they added a tower to it. Have you been seeing an increase in projects that are driven by historic tax credits that are developed?
Recently, I haven't seen any because there's been very few buildings. But yeah, back in, we've done a number where the historic tax credits play a very big role. Some are pretty loosely interpreted, like if you keep the plane of the building, of the wall, you can still remove the wall and put a new wall on as long as the plane stays, which is kind of silly, in the same place. But yeah, there will be more of that. But, you know, there's been very little development in the last few years in the States. I mean, we've had our fee billings, which I won't tell you the total, are very, very good. Only 10% is from the U.S. and 9% from the U.K. and London and Europe, and the rest is Asia or the Mideast. So when you talk about that, you realize there's been very little activity here. Now, I'm not talking about schools or hospitals. I'm just talking about commercial properties. Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about how, for the U.S., for instance, chairs are getting larger. Do you notice that difference between Europe and the U.S., that they tend to have things smaller?
In Europe?
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Even in architecture?
Europeans are much more conscious of space, energy, efficiency, because it's more expensive to live there. I live in London now, so I can tell you the bills are staggering, so you are careful. I've never been the most I mean, I've not been the best in saving energy, so I'm learning because you now pay for it yourself, so, you know, so it does help to see the bill. But, you know, the Europeans are definitely, I mean, look, the Europeans will not have air conditioning if the temperature's in the 70s or high 70s. If they don't bring the temperature down to low 70s or high 60s, you set it for 78, or in some cases 75, but it's not like here. And they open the window, remember, England, Germany, France, the weather is much better in terms of humidity and heat than it is, say, many parts of this country. So you can have your window open while you work, and so operable sash in most European countries is very prevalent. And on double walls, you just have the operable sash on the inside, and you let air in at one point and then into the room at another point, and it works. So, yeah, there's no question. But you remember, they're paying 6 times what we are for energy, 5 to 6 times. So they're going to be very cautious, very careful. Yeah.
What about development attitudes between Asia and the U.S.? Not so much that it's happening versus it's not happening, but the expectations of the people that are your clients in Asia versus the U.S.
Well, tonight I'm going to show you a lot of that, particularly China. But Asia is about building. Let's take China. China is moving 350 million people from the farms to the cities by 2025. And will continue, and the growth in China and the growth of Asia is staggering compared to here. So more and more people will be moving to cities. The amount of buildings they have to build, I have a chart on that, is just staggering to handle. That's the size of the U.S. Just imagine if you move everybody in the U.S. to a city. They weren't in a city. That's what they're doing. So development is of enormous scale and of enormous speed. Projects in China, if you start, you know they're going to finish. And they're going to finish in a reasonable time or a short time because they're needed. And it's unlike here, you know, unless the financing's right or the moment's right or the market's confident, nobody builds. China, they have to build this building. And everybody's afraid of a bubble, but when you're moving that many people, I mean, there's a demand. Now, maybe high-priced apartments are going to go wanting for a while, but office space, you know, you realize every country in the world wants to be represented in China. And in China, because Shanghai and Beijing are kind of like equal, they have banks in both. Not like in New York's the bank and Washington's the political center. In China, Shanghai, and Beijing both have all the major banks. And you know, on and on it goes, that they are building for both their own population and the foreign population that comes there. And so China, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, all very busy. I mean, again, if you go there tonight, you'll see we've done over 120 million or 10 million square feet in China. Just in China. You know, that's like most cities, bigger than most cities in America. And these are great projects. They're complex. They care about quality. They want quality. They want to stand out. They want to do the right thing. I think that's the clients we look for. And it's easier to get anything approved because you know, they have a system that's interesting. Politically and economically, it's a very unique marriage that makes them able to do whatever they want. And as an architect working there, I mean, they're capitalists. They think about making money. They have a lot of rich people, a lot of middle class growing. They all drive beautiful cars and dress nicely and you know, have nice homes. Not everybody, but there's a big middle class. You add to that the demand for all of the things that they need, and they are, you know, really growing and want a better lifestyle, better quality. And they want it done now. So the government, which is basically, call it socialist now, or it's not purely communist anymore, because you can't be communist and capitalist really at the same time. So I want this building built, you know, where's my water bottle? I want that built, it's built. I want the bridge here, it's there. I want the tunnel here, I want the airport here. They don't waste time debating. It's done. Now, you could argue, well, what about the freedom and what about the rights of people? I'm not going to get into a political discussion. But from a purely, you are trying to build a great country overnight and turn it around. Their system is allowing that to happen. And if you're an architect working there, you're going to get your buildings built. 3 years, 4 years, 2 years from now, it's going to happen. So working there is a joy in that sense because you see the completion much sooner than you would here, where you might start something and years later maybe it gets finished. So anyway, and Korea is doing similar, and Singapore's a phenomenal place to work and live. And if you haven't been to Asia, I recommend it. It's amazing what's changed. Again, tonight I dwell a lot on the Asian markets, but if you can. So, all right, the last part of this show, and then I'll answer more questions, is just an interesting architectural debate. I said earlier I was talking about the difference between icons and how in this last go-around we've been more concerned, at least some clients or the press or the critics, about form than function or budget. And I love beautiful forms, don't get me wrong, but so a lot of the forms got to be exaggerated. I remember Mushop, when he was critic of the New York Times, he would say, I don't want any building, he was against anybody that was contextual, that was orthogonal. If it wasn't curved, it wasn't round, you know, it wasn't leaning or twisted, it obviously wasn't a great building. And so obviously Frank Gehry's work was very, and I like Frank, and was very, very successful and interesting, but every building can't be what Frank Gehry does, because you know, it starts not to make a lot of sense. And so architects that were, and you'll see these pictures. So I said, well, let's do a study of the tall building. And so I'm going to take you through a little history of the tall building, to the current tall buildings of this last go-round. And you decide which environment you want to live in. I showed two skylines, one of vertical buildings and the other of moving buildings, we'll call it. You tell me which one you'd like to live in the debate. But I did this in Hong Kong and I got interesting reaction. I happen to believe if you build super tall, or tall buildings, they always stand straight. I mean, just think, why would I want to go to reach to the sky and then do this, or that? I wouldn't do that. If I want to be tall, I want to stand straight. And why would a building, when you think about it, a building has to resist the wind, enormous force, right? And gravity, those two particularly. So when the building is vertical, you know, you're designing it so it resists it. But just take that same building, you lean it. And what have you done? You've increased the gravity problem, and the wind hits it. Now you got to resist the wind in that direction. Doesn't make sense, right? Or if you take floors that are doing this, think about where the glass relates to you, either below you or above you. Or think about how these floors feel if a building's leaning. And every time I see you'll see some buildings that are being built, either both Pedersen and Zadi, and other very good architects have done. But it looks like, you know, somebody has got a deformed back. You know, you see people who are hunched over. Why would you do that? You wouldn't be able to breathe, right? You wouldn't be healthy. So a building to me has a similarity to the human being. And standing straight, no matter what your shape, you could be round or thin, you're straight, it counts. So anyway, this is for entertainment's sake. Let's go through it. Okay, tall buildings. Well, just, you probably know all this, but starting in 1901, the Flatiron Building was one of the first tall buildings in New York. Woolworth Building in 1913, one of the really great ones. And of course, Chrysler in 1930. Still one of my all-time favorites. And the Chrysler being Art Deco, and beautiful top, and the lobbies, you probably all know this. The Empire State, which for a long time was the world's tallest, finished in 31, built in 18 months. You couldn't do this today in 18 months. You couldn't do it in 3 years, probably. But you could then. You know, you see it on the New York skyline. Our office, new office, is right about on 42nd down in here, looking over Bryant Park, and we see the Empire State, so very inspirational. Woolworth in 31. One of my favorite places, Rock Center, finished by 33 in horrible economic times, but has been one of the most successful projects ever. Rents have stayed very high there. It's fully leased. People love to be part of it, and it's now almost 80, over 80 years old. The famous Christmas tree and ice skating make it special. Also, one of my favorites, Mies van der Rohe's Secret Building, one of the first buildings to set back from Park. As long as it was the only one, it was great because it created this wonderful plaza. But if other buildings start doing that, it of course is not a good idea. We saw this before the Hancock in '69. Truly a terrific building by us. And the World Trade Towers, unfortunately, no longer with us. Finished in '73 by Yamasaki and Roth, and these were the super tall buildings at 1,368 feet. And then the Willis Tower, even taller at 1451, was Cedars, now the Willis Tower. Bank of China by Pei, reaching about 1,200 feet at its top, very special building. And of course, Caesar Pelli's Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur became the super tall buildings, and certainly an icon for that country. And Indonesia was counting on this to help. This was built when Hong Kong was losing the British control to the Chinese, and there was a concern that they needed a new financial center in Asia. And India and Kuala Lumpur thought they could be that city, and that this building would cause it to happen. It never did, but it still became a famous building. And the Jinmao Tower by SOM in Shanghai for a long time was at 1,200, the tallest building there, with a wonderful hotel, fine hotel at the top. This building was a series of pagodas in a way, very agitated exterior, but very beautifully detailed. And then in Taipei, hitting over almost 1,500 feet, was Tower 101. But you'll notice they're all straight. Then we started getting into some interesting shapes. Probably the most famous building in London to date, we're doing two that might be better, is the Swiss Re by Norman Foster. That shape caught the imagination of people, and it became the identity of London. Not the tallest, but it's certainly very handsome. And it's not even the most workable or functional, but it was certainly an elegant form that has caught the imagination. This building in Sweden, turning torso, was built, and it never sold, so the government took it over and had to lease all those apartments. And this is one we did, the Shanghai World Financial Center, which Al mentioned is our icon in a sense, but very elegant and still straight. You'll notice every building I just showed you, by many architects, all vertical, right? All reaching for the sky. And this one, the world's tallest to date, 2,000, almost 700 feet, diverged by Adrian Smith and SOM. a little bit questioned why you would do it there. You can't see from most of the floors because between the sandstorms and the moisture, a lot of these windows you don't have any view. And it's like being in the clouds all the time. But if you want an image for the country, you want an icon, this certainly does do it. But again, it's straight, right? In London, we were doing this building, called the Pinnacle, which would be the tallest building in London, at 945. And this is one that being done in New York for the Museum of Modern Art by Nouvel, but they just chopped 200 feet off of it. So that may be the old rendering. It's still not being built. The cost of that's staggering, and it's going to take a while to get financing. Replacing the World Trade Center towers is this development. This building is actually in construction to about here. The first 100 or 200 feet is totally solid for security. No windows, no usable space. So it's a very expensive way to build. And this is being built. Maki's doing this, and David Childs doing that one. The other two are questionable when they happen. But still all vertical, different shapes, but all vertical. But let's go into the sculptural. Okay, right after 9/11, they held competition, you may be aware, for buildings to replace the World Trade Tower. What happened to the World Trade Tower? Does anybody know? Of course you know. Tell me what happened.
Collapsed.
They collapsed, right? Now, would you propose building a building that looked like it was going to collapse to replace it? I'm serious. The emotion of the people who were around, if you were in New York that day, and you saw people jumping out of the building, if you saw those buildings come down and you could not believe it, you would not propose, I don't think, anything that looked like it was going to fall. Because I wouldn't want to be there, right? So, but this was the beginning of this idea that icons and sculpture had to take different shapes than just be vertical. This one, being proposed for the Mideast, I talked to the architect, I won't mention who it is. I said, well, tell me, how does the core work? He said, well, we didn't take it into account. Think about that. The core, you know, with elevators and think about that, okay?
You need to tell us who that is.
Huh?
I think we want to know who's the architect.
I can't tell.
No?
This one by maybe the architect, it's called the Shams. Now, in Abu Dhabi, but you, Adis is the architect. They were the ones, the previous one too. This looks like a heavy wind just came, right? It took a curtain and pushed it. But why would you do that to a building? I mean, what does it really do that makes it great? Unless you just like the form, I guess. This one really gets me. It's like a bunch of snakes coming up, you know? And this is actually being proposed by a very good firm. I have a hard time with this one. I'd hate to fall on top of it. But there it is, okay? Actually being proposed.
How do you lease those floors at the top?
That's the ones.
I mean, you gotta put four
But
people.
why would you want to
I guess you just lease 2/3 of it and let the rest sit.
But why would you want to torture this building? I mean,
I don't know. What'd you do with the core?
this
It
is
runs
actually being
outside the
built.
building.
This is one. This is.
Can you
leased
make
in
the
and some-
elevators go like that?
Well, you can actually.
Yeah, I know.
It's a little expensive. Why would you do this to a building? I mean, if somebody doesn't agree, please don't argue with me. I mean, that's okay. I happen to think you shouldn't do that to architecture. Just think about this floor. You're on one of these floors, right? Just think what this glass is doing in front of you, falling away, right? Now, is you going to feel pretty secure walking up to that window? The glass is doing that? Or are you going to feel good about being on the other side where the glass is coming right up over your head? I don't think so. And I wasn't sure whether the floors tilt like that or they... But all this, anyway, think about this. Why would you do this to a piece of architecture and to a structure? I don't think you should, but obviously Daniel and Zahadi did. This is actually being built now in Singapore. And each one of these has kind of looked like it got shook up by an earthquake. You know, again, I don't know that makes it, do you, well, maybe it makes it better visually. I don't know. Do you think? Anybody agree with that? I mean, you can. Don't. I'm not grading you, so it's okay.
Isn't the key what it's really like to live and work there and to walk around these things? I mean, I am not endorsing the shapes. I have to agree with you. It seems to me that, you know, we live so close together like this in this room. I'd like to see what a classroom in a building like that would be. You know, you've got to be able to do all those same things people have always done for thousands of years.
Exactly. No, I mean, you know, I can see where it's aesthetic, it's composition, there's movement, energy. I mean, I can make a whole speech why it's good. But I don't honestly believe that's right to do that to buildings. Anyway, so I thought, well, you know what? The Leaning Tower must be the inspiration. You know, it's leaning, and everybody goes to see the Leaning Tower, and they love it. Some people hold it up, and others go up. But you know what? It was designed to do that.
Yeah.
I went too fast. Okay. Right? That's what it was designed and built to do. The fact that it's leaning is not basically in the best interest of the tower. But there it is. Okay. So now everybody thinks they should build leaning towers. I love this cartoon. You may not be able to see it. He's saying, sir, the architect said he wanted our new building to make a statement. That's the new building. And then this guy says, then permit me to make a statement. Called Greenberg Lusker, they're lawyers. So, anyway.